really awesome dessert that everybody gets in the restaurant and they wonder how they do it, and I have the trick for you. So it's called Runny chip. It's that yummy, delicious chocolate chip cookie with that melted chocolate in the middle. It's really, really good. Okay, so we're gonna start with, it's not very diet, but it's worth it. We're gonna start with a stick of margarine. And you can soften that up before, so it'll whip up a little easier. I'm gonna spoon in a half a cup of shortening too, because that'll make it airier too. This is the dessert that like everybody chooses. I mean, who wants Napoleon that's been sitting there all day and all these creamy cakes that nobody really likes? Runny chip is certainly the way to go. And they top it with ice cream and whipped cream and share it with a friend. The ramekins we have today are a little smaller, so that's more individually sized. All right, that's an even half a cup. Throw that in there. That should do it. Put this cover on. All right, and let her rip. This is like an incredibly fast mixer. This is really cool. So this is basically whipped. And I'm gonna add the 2 eggs, which have already been checked for blood spots. And while I'm at it, actually I'm gonna just cover that, and I'll add the vanilla in a minute. Okay. Scrape down the sides to make sure you got it all going on in there. Whoa, check it out. Okay. Now I'm going to add a teaspoon of vanilla. Now, I mean, they all claim that you have to use the pure stuff. I use the imitation. Nobody ever knows the difference. It's up to you. This is the pure stuff, though. Only the best for everyday kosher cooking. Throw that in through the top. That's looking nice. Okay. Now I already have 1 1/4 cups of flour measured here. I'm going to add another cup. And of course level it off with your knife. Make sure it's even. Now I'm going to add that to the rest. I'm also going to add a whole tablespoon of salt and a teaspoon of baking soda. Just add that there, and I'm going to throw it in. It'll be fine. Whee! Okay. We have 3/4 cup brown sugar and 3/4 cup regular sugar. Now we're going to let it rip. It's all going to come together nicely, and then we can add the chocolate chips. All right, that looks nice. That looks nice and ready for the chocolate chips. All right, just throw them in. I'm not going to use the whole bag because there's going to be plenty of chocolate once we add that. Cover that up. That's it, not too much because you don't want them all to break into a million pieces. There you go. Now we're going to press them into our ramekins. Just make sure you get some chocolate chips in there. It's just easier to do it with your hands since otherwise they'd break apart. Bring this over here. a little bit on the bottom because these are going to rise of each one. Now the trick here is that you're going to make a little well in the middle of the dough to make room for the secret ingredient. It's not just melted chocolate, it's this stuff that comes in a jar. Now when I first saw it in the store, I was wondering how lazy can people actually be that when they make marble cake, they can't just do it themselves. Then I realized that there's a lot more to it. So I'm just going to clean off my spoon from the shortening. Dip it in here. Now since these ramekins are small, I'm going to use less than the 2 teaspoons in the recipe, because otherwise it would just be all over the place. Just enough to fill that well. That's a lot, okay. And then we're going to have to cover this up. Now I'm going to make a nice well for my liquid marble, which is essentially like melted chocolate that can't really solidify. If you have it in your pantry for a long time, it might separate, kind of like natural peanut butter. But all you got to do is give it a nice little stir, and it'll work fine. This is also a good recipe to do if you're baking with your kids, because they love, first of all, they love just pouring everything into the mixing bowl, and you can do that with, you know, almost any recipe. But my niece and nephew just really enjoyed pressing everything down into the ramekin. They had a lot of fun with it, and they especially had a lot of fun eating it too. A little more of this. And I'm going to throw this into a 350-degree oven. It's nice and hot. We'll check on that in about 10-15 minutes since these are small. They're done. Now if they seem a little raw inside, that's because they probably are, and that just makes it a lot better. I'm going to leave this mid on because they're still really hot, but that makes the best presentation. I'm going to close the oven. Now you just put a little scoop of ice cream on the top, and it's going to melt right away. It's going to be really good. Now you got to shake up your whipped cream. Now I'm using Power of Ice Cream and Power of Whipped Cream because after a meat meal, you can't have milk. Trust me, after a dairy meal, it's a lot better. This, my friend, is decadence. Now you got a little bit of chocolate syrup on top. That'll make it nice and pretty. Just drizzle it all around. Runny chip souffle, baby.